Why do you replay conversations in your head long after they're over? You walk away from a normal interaction, maybe with a friend, a coworker, or someone you just met, and hours later your mind starts playing it back again. You think about the exact words you said, the tone of your voice, the way they reacted, the pause between sentences. Suddenly you start asking yourself questions you didn't think about at the time. Did I say something weird? Did that sound awkward? Did they misunderstand me? Should I have said something different? And before you realize it, you're stuck replaying the same moment again and again in your mind. This experience is extremely common, but it can feel exhausting when it happens constantly. Many people think it means they're socially awkward or overly sensitive, but the psychology behind it is much more complex. What you're experiencing is a mix of self-awareness, social processing, and your brain's attempt to protect you from future mistakes. Human beings are social creatures. For most of our evolutionary history, belonging to a group was directly connected to survival. Being accepted meant safety, being rejected could mean isolation. Because of that, the human brain developed systems that constantly monitor social interactions. Your brain pays attention to how people react to you, how they respond to your words, and whether your behavior helps maintain connection with the group. When you replay a conversation in your head, your brain is essentially reviewing social data. It's analyzing what happened, so it can learn how to handle similar situations in the future. In small amounts, this process is actually helpful. It helps you become more socially aware, more thoughtful in communication, and more capable of understanding other people's reactions. But when this mental replay becomes constant, it can turn into overthinking. Instead of learning from the interaction, your mind gets stuck in a loop of self-criticism and imagined scenarios. One reason this happens is because the brain is extremely sensitive to uncertainty. If you leave a conversation feeling completely confident about how it went, your brain usually moves on quickly. But if something felt slightly unclear or ambiguous, your mind tries to fill in the missing information. Maybe someone paused before responding. Maybe their facial expression was hard to read. Maybe you noticed a moment of silence after a joke. Even small uncertainties like this can trigger your brain to start analyzing the situation in detail. The mind prefers certainty, so when something feels socially unclear, it starts searching for answers. Another factor behind replaying conversations is self-awareness. People who are more reflective and emotionally aware often think deeply about their interactions. They pay attention to tone, body language, and emotional responses. This can be a strength because it helps you understand people better. But the downside is that high self-awareness can easily turn into self-criticism if you start judging every detail of your behavior. Instead of simply observing what happened, you start evaluating yourself harshly. You imagine how the other person might have interpreted your words. You start creating possible negative explanations for things that may not have meant anything at all. This is where overthinking begins. Your brain stops analyzing the real conversation and starts creating hypothetical versions of it. You imagine different responses you could have given. You picture how the conversation might have gone if you had said something smarter, funnier, or more confident. This mental editing process can make the original moment feel worse than it actually was. Social anxiety can also play a role in this pattern. When someone is worried about how others perceive them, their brain becomes highly alert to social feedback. After a conversation, their mind keeps scanning for signs of possible mistakes or embarrassment. The brain thinks it's helping by identifying potential problems, but in reality it often exaggerates them. Something that the other person forgot about 5 minutes later can stay in your mind for hours. Another reason conversations replay in your head is something psychologists call the negativity bias. The human brain naturally pays more attention to negative experiences than positive ones. This helped our ancestors survive by noticing potential threats in the environment. But in modern life, it means that your mind is more likely to focus on the one awkward moment in a conversation rather than the many normal or positive parts. Even if most of the interaction went well, your brain might zoom in on the single detail that felt uncomfortable. It keeps replaying that moment as if it's the most important part of the entire interaction. Memory also plays a role. When something feels emotionally significant, the brain stores it more strongly. Social interactions are often emotionally meaningful because they involve connection, identity, and how we are perceived by others. If a moment during a conversation triggered embarrassment, uncertainty, or vulnerability, your brain may replay it simply because it registered as important. It's trying to process the emotional meaning of that moment. The problem is that the brain doesn't always know when to stop processing. Instead of learning from the experience and moving forward, it keeps circling the same thoughts. Each time you replay the conversation, you reinforce the memory and make it feel more significant than it actually was. Over time, this can create the feeling that every interaction needs to be analyzed in detail. But here's something important to remember. Most of the time, other people are not analyzing your words nearly as much as you are. Just like you're busy thinking about your own actions, they're usually focused on themselves. People tend to forget small conversational details very quickly, especially if nothing dramatic happened. What feels like a big moment in your mind may barely register in someone else's. Another useful perspective is that conversations are naturally imperfect. Human communication is messy. People pause, stumble over words, misunderstand things, and say awkward sentences all the time. That's part of normal social interaction. Trying to mentally edit every conversation as if it needed to be perfect creates unnecessary pressure. Instead of treating every interaction like a performance that must be evaluated, it can help to see conversations as fluid exchanges that don't need to be flawless. If your mind tends to replay conversations often, the goal isn't to completely stop thinking about them. Reflection can actually be valuable when it leads to learning and self-awareness. The key difference is whether your thoughts are constructive or repetitive. Constructive reflection asks simple questions like, "What can I learn from this?" or "Was there something I'd do differently next time?" Once the lesson is clear, the mind can move on. Overthinking, on the other hand, keeps circling the same questions without reaching a conclusion. It searches for certainty that doesn't exist. Learning to recognize that difference can make a big impact. The moment you notice your mind replaying the same conversation again and again, you can gently interrupt the cycle by reminding yourself that your brain is simply trying to protect you socially. It's attempting to help you avoid mistakes in the future. But that protection doesn't require endless analysis. Often the most helpful response is simply acknowledging the thought and letting it pass rather than engaging with it further. Over time, this reduces the brain's habit of looping through the same social memories. If you find yourself replaying conversations in your head frequently, it may actually be a sign that you care about how you interact with people. You want to communicate well, be understood, and maintain good relationships. Those intentions are positive. The challenge is learning to balance self-awareness with self-compassion. Conversations don't have to be perfect in order to be meaningful, and most of the moments that feel awkward in your mind are far less significant to others than they appear in your thoughts. The next time you notice yourself replaying a conversation hours later, pause and ask yourself one simple question. Is this helping me understand something useful, or am I just repeating the same moment out of habit? Sometimes the healthiest response isn't finding a better answer, it's allowing the moment to be imperfect and moving forward anyway. And if you enjoy learning about the psychology behind everyday behaviors like overthinking, relationships, and emotional patterns, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There are many more videos coming where we explore why the mind works the way it does, and how understanding it can help you navigate life and relationships with more clarity. Bye.